47 years after its European release, we finally said goodbye to the Fiesta last year, but it remains Britain's best-selling used car and can justifiably claim to be Britain's best-loved super mini. Now, part of that appeal has always been the hot versions, but it took a while to get going. We first saw a hot Fiesta in 1980, the Supersport, which was followed in 1981 by the XR2, but neither, to be truthful, could be described as hot, more lukewarm. That all changed in 1990 with the arrival of the Fiesta RS Turbo, starting off a trend that finished with the ST. But can the RS Turbo of more than 30 years ago hold a candle to the modern Mk8 ST? Well, we're going to have fun trying to find out. So here we are in what many people would describe as Ford's first hot Fiesta. It wasn't the first sporty one. There was an S in the range right from the beginning in 1976. And then the Supersport of 1980, which had the 1.3 engine and used accessories from the Series X catalogue. Things didn't really turn up until the 1981 XR2 with the 1.6 Kent Crossflow, and then you had the Mk2 XR2 with the CVH engine. But it was with this car, the RS Turbo of 1990, that things went up to 11. From the exterior, it looked broadly the same as the XR2i of the time, the Mark III. But rather than blue inserts in the bumper, you got green ones, which I always thought were really cool. And you got 14-inch, sounds tiny now, 3-spoke alloys, and the Fiesta was always very good at making 3-spoke alloys look cool. You also got that all-important vented bonnet and the RS Turbo script on the back. Now, it would be simplistic to say that Ford took the engine from the Mark IV Escort RS Turbo and plonked it in the front of the Fiesta. Now, essentially that is what they did, but it had different engine management, different manifolds, different intercooler, and a smaller Garrett T2 turbo, which spooled up faster to make it more usable. And at lower revs, you don't get as much lag driving the Fiesta RS Turbo as you do the Escort. Now, this was, for its time, a quick car. 130 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 7.9 seconds, which was comparable with a Peugeot 205 GTI 1.9, but where it really was strong was in the 30 to 70 zone, and it was 3/4 of a second quicker than the 205. And you can really feel that mid-range shove. There's a lot of torque to play with, and it's a quick car. It's worth remembering at the time, of course, that it was the fastest Ford this side of a Sierra RS Cosworth. Now, what it wasn't was particularly cheap. It was $11,950 when released, which was £1,100 more than the XR2, which makes it sound like a bargain, but a Renault 5 GT Turbo was cheaper, a Fiat Uno Turbo was cheaper, and even a Lancia Delta HF Turbo was cheaper, and that was a much bigger car. Inside, again, very similar to the XR2, but you've got this lovely leather-rimmed steering wheel, and quite frankly, some of the best seats ever fitted to a car. These awesome RS Turbo Recaros, which have been transplanted into loads of other cars, such as their popularity. So what else did Ford do to the RS Turbo? Well, apart from the engine, it's a special vehicle engineering department, tweaked the suspension, lowered and stiffer springs, rear anti-roll bar and gas-filled dampers, and that made it quite stiff. But this one's lowered, so it's probably even stiffer. So the ride, a little bit crashy over bumps. We're on a very smooth circuit here, but you're going to get a few rattles. But the bonus of that is you get very little body roll when pushing on, and the turn-in's really good. Now, back in the day, these were criticised because the steering is a bit numb. It's certainly very, very heavy at low speeds and when parking, and at speed, you know, it's not the most feelsome. I think you'd have to really be giving it some beans or hit a bump mid-corner to knock it out of shape. It does cling on well. Sadly, the RS Turbo was short-lived. Came out in 1990, and by 1992, it was all over. The turbocharged CVH couldn't meet upcoming emission regulations, needed a catalytic converter. So Ford dropped the model, put the 1.8 Zetec in, and launched the RS 1800 instead. Now, that's a good car, but it's not as fizzy or as frantic as the RS Turbo, and wasn't quite as fast. Probably not quite as exciting as well. It coincided with manufacturers losing their turbocharged models, insurance prices were going through the roof, and a new sort of breed of multi-valve hot hatches were on the scene. So you lost the Renault 5 Turbo, that was replaced by the Clio 16 valve. We lost the Uno Turbo, and we lost this. And after the RS 1800 disappeared in 1994, we kind of lost the hot Fiesta altogether. We had the 1.6 SI for a little while, but come the launch of the Mark IV Fiesta in 1995, there was really no hot model at all to speak of. Ford launched its ST badge in 1997, but we had to wait until 2004 for it to appear on the Mark VI Fiesta. Now those ST models set a bit of a new legacy, culminating in the Mark 8 car that we're about to drive. Now I absolutely love this, but I can't wait to see how the Mark 8 measures up. So here we are then in the Mark 8 ST, the final hot Fiesta. Now to give a bit of background on the ST, the first one arrived in 2004 with a 2-litre engine, 4-cylinder, around 140 horsepower. And when the Mark 7 Fiesta came out in 2009, there was no real hot version again. It was a bit like going back to the Mark IV. There was the ZTEC S, but we had to wait until 2013 for the ST to make a return with the 1.6-litre EcoBoost engine producing 179 horsepower. Now, that car was absolutely critically acclaimed. Everybody loved it. You know, it was a cock-a-wheel dancing machine that just punched above its weight and hugely entertaining to drive. And while previous Fiestas had been fun, fast, frantic, Ford now had a class leader on its hands. So when it came to the Mark 8 of 2018, it was a really hard act to follow. Ford could be forgiven for keeping things the same, putting the 1.6 engine in the new body shell, but no, they changed things up again, and it was a bit of a gamble, but it's a gamble I think that paid off. So instead they went for, rather than the 1.6-litre engine, they went for a 1.5-litre 3-cylinder. Now a few eyebrows are raised at that decision, but the 1.5-litre EcoBoost engine is a real cracker. 200 horsepower, this will do 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, top speed of 144 mile an hour, not that I've ever done it, and just so flexible, so torquey. You know, you go into a corner, you just nail it and it just picks up straight away, there's no lag, it's just instant power. Such a nice thing to drive, you know. None of that turbo lag of old, just really, really impressive. And not only is it a fast engine, it's a clever engine too. When you're on the motorway, it will shut a cylinder down, so it's a 2-cylinder unit on, you know, when you're not pushing it. And the economy is very impressive. I use this car all the time. It's currently showing 41.5 miles to the gallon, which is just remarkable, really, given that it doesn't always get the easiest time. Now, the other thing to mention is the steering. The RS Turbo is decent when it comes to turn-in, but as I said before, it's a little bit numb. Not so this. It's power assisted, but it's really nicely weighted to give it that proper sporty feel, and it's just a really nice thing to drive. And of course, being power assisted, it's light when you come to park, which is one of the big complaints about the RS Turbo. So what else impresses about this car? Well, the ride. It's a lot softer than the Mark 7. The Mark 7 was really harsh. It's still stiff, but it's a little bit more compliant. Now what Ford did, they put basically what they called force vectoring springs on, which means when you really push it into a bend, those springs stiffen up, support you, a bit like a helping hand. I mean, if you go fast enough, you will cock a wheel. I'm not quite going fast enough for that at the moment. In terms of just tootling along, things are a little bit softer, a bit more comfortable. This is pretty much a do-anything hot hatch. And I should point out, it goes like stink. There are 3 modes that you can select. You know, normal, sport, which hunkers down the suspension, opens up the flap in the exhaust and makes it just pop and bang a little bit. Not remat pop and bang, just pop and bang. And then there's race mode, which switches off the traction control and makes it leery. So how does it compare to the RS Turbo? Well, objectively, it's better. I mean, the thing is with the ST, it became a class leader rather than another hot hatch. You know, the ST really, in Mark 7 and Mark 8 guys, really pushed the Fiesta to the top of the tree. It has very few rivals nowadays, and you might say it's really, despite being discontinued last year, it's kind of the last bastion of an original sort of analog hot hatch with a manual gearbox, not a hyper hatch, not a four-wheel drive, two-wheel drive. They just don't make cars like this anymore, and this is kind of the last hurrah. And that's another reason why I love it so much. I mean, this is owned by Kelsey Media, this is my company car. You know, we're supposed to give them back after 3 years. I've had it more than 3 years, I don't want to give it back. They're gonna have to wrestle the keys from me. That's how much I like it. And in all this time I've had it, precisely nothing has gone wrong with it. I don't want to sound like I'm too gushing in praise for a vehicle, but this is one of the best cars I've ever owned. One of the best cars I've driven, and I just love it. I really love that RS Turbo, but the Mk8 ST is something special. A genuine future classic in my eyes. It would be a really tough decision if you could only have one, of which one you'd have. The one that evokes all the nostalgia, the one that looks so cool with its little green inserts in the bumper, or this, which is much more subtle to look at, but as a package, is absolutely tremendous. Let's face it, without the RS Turbo, would we have ever got here? Who knows? But I'm glad we did.